Welcome to InfoStream, your daily current. Unsure what to listen to? Turn to us for today's headlines. Stay informed. U.S. investigates Caribbean strike allegations, tensions rise with Maduro amid U.S. pressure. Russia-Ukraine talks continue with shifting dynamics. Honduras election remains Contentious with Trump-influenced military presence, suffering highlights ongoing crisis. U.S. ex-military presence, a Carson devastating floods and emergency. Remember, crisis worsens significantly. Visa debate, visa continues with continued domestic protests. Link to WWO and Embarks on diplomatic mission. Zero Caron from Chronicle faces protest voters over Escalating. Musk and France beautiful filled with a face over zero low correct. A U.S. lawmakers scrutinize Caribbean strike. Allegations of kill everybody. Order: a growing controversy surrounds the U.S. military's lethal strikes against suspected drug smuggling boats in the Caribbean, fueled by reports of a potential war crime. Republican and Democratic lawmakers are demanding answers regarding a follow-up strike that allegedly resulted in the deaths of survivors after an initial attack failed to eliminate the entire crew of a vessel. The Washington Post report detailing Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's alleged order to kill everybody on one of the boats has intensified scrutiny. Multiple congressional committees, including the Senate and House Armed Services Committees, have announced plans for vigorous oversight of the operations. These investigations are prompted by concerns that the follow-up strike, which resulted in 11 deaths, violated the laws of armed conflict, specifically the prohibition against targeting hors de combat. President Donald Trump has expressed confidence that Hegseth did not order the second strike, stating that the secretary didn't even know what people were talking about. He indicated he personally would not have approved such an action. The controversy is further complicated by the recent resignations of two high-ranking military officials, coinciding with the emergence of the kill everybody allegations. The timing of these departures has raised questions about potential pressure or concerns within the Department of Defense. Lawmakers across both parties have voiced serious reservations about the legality of the operation, with figures like Senator Tim Kaine suggesting the strike constitutes a war crime if the allegations are substantiated. The initial strike disabled the boat and caused deaths, but subsequent assessment revealed surviving crew members, leading to the second, fatal attack. The Department of Defense has maintained that the operations are lawful and in compliance with international law, supported by legal counsel. The investigations are focused on determining the chain of command's involvement, the justification for the second strike, and whether proper protocols were followed. The ongoing scrutiny highlights potential legal and ethical challenges associated with U.S. military operations in international waters. Escalating tensions as Maduro resurfaces amid U.S. military pressure. Recent developments reveal a heightened state of crisis as Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro made his first public appearance in days, signaling an attempt to project stability amidst growing U.S. military pressure. Maduro was present at a specialty coffee awards event in eastern Caracas, a move intended to counter perceptions of a potential flight and reaffirm Venezuela's defiance. Simultaneously, U.S. President Donald Trump confirmed a phone call with Maduro, though he characterized the exchange as a phone call, offering no substantive details. The U.S. military continues its assertive posture in the Caribbean, deploying over 15,000 troops and a dozen warships, ostensibly to combat drug trafficking, but viewed by Caracas as an attempt to forcibly remove Maduro. This escalation has fueled international concern and heightened tensions. Venezuela, meanwhile, has publicly acknowledged that some of its citizens were killed by the U.S. strikes on alleged drug boats, labeling the attacks murder, and demanding an investigation. National Assembly President George Rodriguez stated that the government would convene a special commission to determine the circumstances surrounding the deaths and ensure due process for the victims. Adding to the complexity, Venezuela's oil reserves remain a focal point, with Maduro accusing the U.S. of seeking to seize them through force, prompting a formal letter to OPEC. The Venezuelan government has vowed to defend its resources against what it perceives as an aggressive campaign. The U.S. military's actions have triggered a fierce response from Caracas, which accuses Washington of engaging in murder. The Venezuelan parliament has pledged to investigate the strikes and hold those responsible accountable. The situation remains volatile, with both sides escalating their rhetoric and actions, raising concerns about a potential wider conflict. The investigation into the deaths is expected to be a key element in determining the next steps. Russia-Ukraine talks continue amidst diplomatic efforts and shifting dynamics. Recent diplomatic efforts to end the Russia-Ukraine war have intensified with multiple meetings taking place, primarily in Florida, involving U.S. officials and Ukrainian negotiators. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, alongside Steve Witkoff and Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, engaged in talks with Ukrainian representatives, including Rustem Umerov, the newly appointed chief Ukrainian negotiator, aiming to establish a framework for a potential peace agreement. These discussions followed the release of a 28-point U.S. peace plan, which initially shocked Ukraine and its allies due to its perceived prioritization of Russian interests. The talks centered on key issues such as Ukraine's future security, including the possibility of NATO membership, and the long-term prosperity of the nation. Umerov emphasized Ukraine's priorities securing its future, preventing future aggression, and facilitating reconstruction. Rubio characterized the meetings as very productive and useful, stressing the importance of establishing a sustainable framework for Ukraine's sovereignty and independence. Following the Florida meetings, Donald Trump expressed confidence in a potential deal, stating there was a good chance of a resolution. He confirmed plans for Witkoff and Kushner to travel to Moscow to meet with Vladimir Putin. The Kremlin subsequently announced that Witkoff would meet Putin on Tuesday. Volodymyr Zelensky acknowledged the constructive nature of the talks and expressed gratitude for U.S. support. However, internal challenges within Ukraine remain, as evidenced by the resignation of Andriy Yermak, the previous chief negotiator, following an anti-corruption raid. 2 cabinet ministers were also dismissed. Despite these ongoing complexities, the diplomatic activity underscores a persistent effort to find a path towards a peaceful conclusion to the conflict, with multiple actors involved and differing perspectives on the key terms and conditions of a potential settlement. The situation remains fluid and dependent on continued negotiations and shifts in strategic priorities. Honduras election remains tight as Trump intervention dominates narrative. The Honduran presidential election remains exceptionally close, with preliminary results showing a razor-thin margin between conservative candidates Nasri, Tito, Asfura and Salvador Nasrallah. As of early Monday, Asfura held a slight lead at 45% compared to Nasrallah's 39.78%, with Rixi Moncada of the Libiari party trailing at 19.8%. The race is heavily influenced by U.S. President Donald Trump's intervention, specifically his announcement of a planned pardon for former President Juan Orlando Hernandez, currently serving a 45-year sentence in the United States for drug trafficking. The National Electoral Council stressed the preliminary nature of the results, acknowledging that significant ballots remain to be counted, particularly from more remote communities, potentially shifting the outcome. 5 candidates are vying for the presidency, with Asfura's platform focusing on development and investment, while Nasrallah has consistently campaigned against corruption. Trump's endorsement of Asfura, framing him as the only Honduran candidate the U.S. would support, has been a central element of the campaign. He warned that Nasrallah and Moncada could lead Honduras down a path similar to Venezuela, citing concerns about their relationships with current Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. The campaign has been marked by accusations of election fixing, raising concerns among observers about the process credibility. Moncada, the current President Xiomara Castro's chosen successor, has expressed skepticism about the preliminary results and vowed to await a full count. Voters are preoccupied with issues of security, unemployment, and the country's high homicide rate, concerns that have persisted despite improvements under Castro's administration. The election also includes the selection of a new Congress and numerous local representatives. The U.S. has provided substantial aid to Honduras, totaling over $193 million last fiscal year, and has already cut $167 million in aid earmarked for 2024 and 2025, reflecting the ongoing political tensions. The outcome remains uncertain as the final vote tally unfolds, highlighting the significant influence of external actors in the Honduran political landscape. The horrific escape from El-Fasher, a chronicle of suffering and resilience, to the recent fall of El-Fasher in Darfur, orchestrated by the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, has resulted in a mass exodus of civilians characterized by extreme violence, displacement, and profound suffering. Accounts from those who managed to escape paint a harrowing picture of systematic brutality, including direct shootings, vehicle-mounted executions, and widespread sexual violence perpetrated by RSF fighters. Abdulkadir Abdullah Ali, a 62-year-old diabetic, recounted witnessing the deliberate targeting of civilians, including the elderly and women, with live ammunition, describing a chaotic scramble for survival. Many survivors, like Moham Abbaker Adam, a local official, fled Zamzam after it was overrun by the RSF, detailing the horrific sights of bodies left unburied and the constant threat of violence. The journey to Al-Daban, the primary refugee camp, was marked by checkpoints where individuals were forced to pay for passage, often stripping them of their possessions. RSF fighters allegedly stole money, phones, and clothing, further compounding the survivors' distress. The RSF's attempts to portray a positive image through staged interactions and humanitarian aid distribution have been met with skepticism, as individuals like Mohammed Baker Adam highlighted the stark contrast between the public facade and the reality of brutal treatment, including beatings and intimidation. The separation of men and women by the RSF, with young men being forcibly recruited, is a recurring theme. Despite the overwhelming trauma, survivors demonstrate resilience, desperately seeking assistance and attempting to rebuild their lives. The U.S. government has declared that the RSF committed genocide in Darfur and has increased its focus on the conflict. However, for those escaping El-Fasher, a peaceful resolution and a secure future remain distant prospects, with ongoing reports of continued atrocities and a lack of effective intervention. The situation underscores the immense human cost of the ongoing civil war in Sudan. U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean and Afghan evacuation vetting concerns. Recent developments highlight concerns regarding the U.S. military's increased presence in the Caribbean and critical questions surrounding the vetting process employed during the evacuation of Afghan evacuees following the Taliban's takeover in 2021. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem asserted that the Biden administration inadequately vetted these individuals, claiming a delayed and insufficient vetting process was implemented. These accusations echo sentiments previously voiced by former President Donald Trump and other administration officials, particularly in the context of the shooting involving an Afghan suspect who arrived under the Operation Allies Welcome scheme. The Operation Allies Welcome program, designed to facilitate the safe relocation of Afghan nationals after the collapse of the Afghan government, involved a stated vetting process encompassing fingerprint reviews, photographic assessments, and biometric data analysis for each evacuee. However, subsequent government audits conducted between 2022 and 2024 revealed significant shortcomings within this process. The audits identified instances of inaccurate, incomplete, or missing data within the Department of Homeland Security's records concerning the evacuees. A key factor contributing to these issues was the lack of a comprehensive list of Afghan individuals who lacked sufficient identification documentation. Jenny Murray, representing the National Immigration Forum, corroborated the extensive vetting undertaken, detailing the processing of evacuees on military bases, spanning several weeks to months, during which security screenings and medical evaluations were conducted. Despite this prolonged and rigorous process, the audits exposed critical flaws in data management, raising serious questions about the thoroughness of the initial vetting efforts. The situation underscores the complexities of rapidly responding to a humanitarian crisis, while simultaneously ensuring national security, and the challenges associated with maintaining accurate records during such operations. The ongoing military buildup in the Caribbean further adds a layer of strategic consideration to these concerns, demanding careful assessment of potential security implications. Devastating floods trigger state of emergency in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is currently facing a severe humanitarian crisis following catastrophic flooding and mudslides, triggered by Cyclone Ditwa and exacerbated by heavy rainfall. The disaster has resulted in at least 193 confirmed deaths, with hundreds more still missing, marking one of the country's worst weather-related catastrophes in recent years. Over 20,000 homes have been completely destroyed, forcing approximately 108,000 individuals to seek refuge in state-run temporary shelters. The impact extends beyond immediate loss of life. A significant portion of the nation, roughly a third, is without essential utilities, including electricity and running water. The worst affected areas include Kandy and Badula, where access remains severely limited due to extensive landslides blocking roads. Residents of Maspana, Badula, are particularly vulnerable, reporting a dire situation with limited food and clean water, highlighting the isolation and hardship experienced by many. A tragic incident involved 11 residents of an elderly care home in Chronicle, who perished when the facility was flooded, demonstrating the vulnerability of vulnerable populations. Rescue efforts have been ongoing for 24 hours, with significant assistance provided by the Navy. 69 individuals were successfully rescued from a submerged bus in Anuradhapura, illustrating the perilous conditions faced by those attempting to evacuate. The precarious situation led to a dramatic rescue involving climbing onto the roof of a building, where a portion collapsed, resulting in 3 women falling into the water, but ultimately being recovered. The Sri Lankan government has declared a state of emergency and issued a public appeal for international aid, simultaneously urging Sri Lankans abroad to contribute financially to support the affected communities. The scale of the devastation underscores the urgent need for assistance and highlights the long-term challenges facing the nation as it recovers from this unprecedented disaster. Iran's catastrophic water crisis deepens. Iran is grappling with a severe and unprecedented water crisis, impacting major cities like Tehran and Mashhad, and threatening the nation's long-term stability. The crisis stems from decades of over-extraction of water resources, combined with aging infrastructure, dam construction, and the effects of climate change. Rainfall has been absent for 6 consecutive years, creating conditions unseen in modern times. The situation is particularly dire in Tehran, where reservoirs are critically low, only 11% full, and water pressure has been reduced, leading to sporadic dry taps. President Masoud Pezeshkian has warned of potential evacuation if rainfall doesn't arrive by December, a measure considered unfeasible due to economic constraints and logistical challenges. Nationwide, approximately 20 provinces have experienced no rainfall since the start of the rainy season, with roughly 10% of Iran's dams effectively dried up. Agricultural practices, encouraged in part by Western sanctions, have expanded irrigated farmland, particularly rice cultivation, further exacerbating water demand. The vast majority of Iran's water supplies, around 90%, is allocated to agriculture. Lake Urmia, once one of the planet's largest saltwater lakes, has shriveled dramatically due to dam construction and water extraction, representing a significant ecological loss. Authorities have attempted cloud seeding, but its effectiveness remains debated. Contributing factors include a growing urban population, increasing industrial demands, particularly oil and gas, and a significant loss of treated water through leaky distribution systems, estimated at 30%. Government communication has been inconsistent, fueling mistrust and conspiracy theories. Despite these challenges, officials are continuing to pray for rain and implement temporary public holidays to encourage residents to reduce water consumption. However, experts emphasize that fundamental reforms, including diversifying the economy away from water-intensive sectors and addressing the root causes of over-extraction, are urgently needed. The crisis is increasingly intertwined with Iran's social and political future, and the consequences of inaction are severe, with irreversible damage to ecosystems and potential long-term societal instability. The situation is not a short-term disaster, but a rolling, long-term catastrophe. H-1B visa debate. Musk defense program. Amidst concerns, Elon Musk has voiced his support for the H-1B visa program, while acknowledging concerns regarding its potential misuse, primarily by outsourcing firms. Speaking on a podcast with entrepreneur Nikhil Kamath, Musk stated that the program was being gamed, but insisted the solution lay in stopping the abuse, not dismantling the system entirely, a position differing from some conservative viewpoints. He emphasized that America has historically benefited from skilled Indian migrant workers, a sentiment that highlights the ongoing debate surrounding immigration policies. The controversy stems largely from the lottery system used for H-1B visa approvals, which has been exploited by outsourcing and staffing companies. Tactics such as submitting multiple entries for the same worker, or using the visa for low-cost contract labor instead of specialty occupations, have drawn criticism. Recent data from the National Foundation for American Policy, NFAP, reveals a significant decline in H-1B approvals for Indian outsourcing companies, with the top 7 firms receiving only 573 initial approvals this financial year, a 70% drop from 2015 and a 37% decrease compared to 2024. This decline coincides with President Donald Trump's policies, including a 100,000 application fee, which has raised anxieties among Indian workers and employers. Trump's administration has also utilized tariffs as a key economic policy, a strategy Musk unsuccessfully attempted to dissuade him from, arguing that tariffs create market distortions. The U.S. imposed 50% tariffs on Indian goods, including a 25% penalty for buying Russian oil, further exacerbating trade tensions. Despite ongoing negotiations for a trade deal between the U.S. and India, Indian exports to the U.S. continue to face some of the highest levies globally. Despite these challenges, Musk maintains the importance of the H-1B program, recognizing its contribution to technological advancements and skilled labor. The situation underscores a complex intersection of immigration policy, economic trade, and technological innovation, with significant implications for both the U.S. and India. The ongoing negotiations for a trade deal represent a crucial step toward potentially resolving trade disputes and fostering greater economic cooperation. Tulip Siddiq, MP, given jail sentence in Bangladesh following controversial trial. Tulip Siddiq, a Labour MP, has been sentenced to 2 years in prison and a 100,000 Bangladeshi taka fine following a trial in her absence regarding allegations of influencing her aunt, Sheikh Hasina, to secure a plot of land. The trial, conducted by Bangladeshi authorities, stemmed from claims Siddiq forced Hasina to grant land to her family. Siddiq vehemently denies the charges, describing the process as trial by media and Kafkaesque. Authorities obtained Siddiq's Bangladeshi passport ID and tax number, leading to her conviction. The trial, initiated in August, has been plagued by concerns regarding a lack of a fair legal process, with senior legal professionals highlighting Siddiq's inability to secure proper representation. The sentencing follows a period of legal action against Hasina and her associates since her regime was overthrown in July 2024. Hasina herself was previously sentenced to death in a separate trial concerning the crackdown on protests. Siddiq's aunt, Sheikh Hasina, remains in exile in India. The allegations center around approximately $234 billion in alleged corruption during Hasina's tenure. The Awami League, Hasina's political party, has firmly denied the accusations, stating the trial fails any reasonable test of judicial fairness. Senior lawyers, including Robert Buckland, Dominic Grieve, and Sherry Blair, have expressed serious concerns about the fairness of the proceedings. They emphasize Siddiq's lack of access to legal representation. The UK does not have an extradition treaty with Bangladesh. Siddiq's resignation from her junior ministerial role was motivated by a desire to avoid being a distraction for the government, following an investigation by Sir Laurie Magnus. While Magnus found no evidence of improprieties, he noted Siddiq's failure to fully consider the potential reputational risks associated with her ties to Hasina. The case continues with Siddiq facing further charges including investigations into alleged embezzlement and a FAR 3.9 billion deal connected to a Russian-funded nuclear power plant. The Awami League continues to accuse the judiciary of being controlled by Hasina's political opponents. Georgian protests linked to World War I chemical agent. A BBCI investigations report has uncovered evidence suggesting that Georgian authorities used a chemical weapon, likely bromobenzyl cyanide camity, to quell anti-government protests in November 2024. The investigation, based on a study by pediatrician Dr. Konstantin Chakashvili, survivor testimonies, and a former head of weaponry within Georgia's riot police, Lasha Sherjalashvili's account, indicates the use of this obsolete chemical, developed during World War I. Sherjalashvili, who tested the chemical in 2009, described its unusually potent and persistent effects, noting it was far stronger than conventional riot control agents like CS gas. The investigation revealed that the Special Tasks Department, Georgia's riot police unit, possessed inventory of two unnamed chemicals: chemical liquid UN-17 and 10, trichloroethylene, and chemical powder UN-3439 with instructions for their mixing. Dr. Chakonashvili's study involving nearly 350 protesters revealed that around half experienced long-term symptoms: headaches, fatigue, coughs, shortness of breath, and vomiting lasting over 30 days. A peer-reviewed toxicology report further confirmed a significantly higher prevalence of heart abnormalities among the affected individuals. The investigation highlighted the dangers of using outdated and potent chemicals in crowd control, particularly considering the availability of safer alternatives. Experts believe camite was employed as a deterrent, preventing prolonged exposure and necessitating hospitalization. The BBC's findings raised serious concerns about potential human rights violations and the use of chemical weapons, given the international legal restrictions surrounding their deployment. UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Alice Edwards, expressed alarm, emphasizing the unacceptable practice of subjecting populations to experimental chemicals. Toxicology expert Christopher Holstage concluded that the evidence strongly supported the use of camite, citing the persistence of the symptoms and the chemical's distinctive irritant properties. The investigation prompted a response from Georgia's government, which initially dismissed the findings but subsequently refused to comment further. The report underscored the need for greater accountability and transparency in the use of crowd control measures by law enforcement agencies. Pope Leo's diplomatic debut, a mission of peace and reconciliation. Pope Leo XIV's inaugural foreign trip, commencing with a visit to Beirut, Lebanon, marks a significant shift in his approach to leadership, diverging from his predecessor's more outspoken style. The Pope's deliberate and thoughtful demeanor reflects a period of assessment and strategic planning, prioritizing diplomacy and reconciliation amidst complex geopolitical and sectarian challenges. His arrival in Beirut, following a week in Turkey, was met with considerable anticipation, particularly given Lebanon's ongoing governance issues and historical conflicts. During his time in Turkey, Pope Leo addressed concerns regarding global conflict, directly attributing heightened tensions to the undue influence of powerful nations. He forcefully condemned the justification of war through religion, advocating for the rejection of fundamentalism and fanaticism. In Lebanon, he engaged in direct dialogue with leading politicians, emphasizing their duty to serve their people, a core tenet of his mission as a messenger of peace. Despite the complexities of Lebanon's situation, including the decades-old Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Pope Leo maintained a nuanced approach, acknowledging Israel's reluctance to accept a Palestinian state while reaffirming the Vatican's commitment to fostering dialogue and mediation. Notably, he extended a warm welcome even to Hezbollah, a Shia Muslim political party and militia considered a terrorist organization by several nations, demonstrating a desire for inclusivity and bridging divides. The Pope's visit was met with widespread support across Lebanon's diverse religious landscape, including a 2-day national holiday and greetings from leaders of the Maronite Catholic Church, Druze communities, and even Hezbollah. This diplomatic debut underscores Pope Leo's commitment to fostering understanding and promoting peace in regions grappling with deep-seated divisions, positioning him as a bridge builder between faiths, denominations, and nations. Zelensky's historic visit to Ireland signals strong support. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is undertaking a significant visit to the Republic of Ireland, scheduled for Tuesday, marking the first time a Ukrainian president has formally visited the country. The visit is occurring at a critical juncture, coinciding with the inauguration of the Ireland-Ukraine Economic Forum. President Zelensky will hold a key meeting with Taoiseach, Irish Prime Minister Michael Martin in Dublin, solidifying the already established close relationship between the nations. Furthermore, he will undertake a courtesy call with newly inaugurated Irish President Catherine Connolly. The visit underscores Ireland's unwavering support for Ukraine in its ongoing defense against Russia's illegal invasion. Since the conflict began in February 2022, over 120,000 Ukrainian refugees have found refuge in Ireland, demonstrating the nation's generosity and commitment to humanitarian aid. While many have since returned home, approximately 80,000 remain living in Ireland, contributing significantly to communities across the country. The Ireland-Ukraine Economic Forum, attended by TO Nast Simon Harris and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade Helen McEntee, will serve as a platform to further strengthen economic ties and explore collaborative opportunities. This forum highlights Ireland's recognition of the Ukrainian community's valued contribution to Irish society. The visit represents a tangible expression of solidarity and a reaffirmation of Ireland's dedication to supporting Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, demonstrating a crucial partnership during a challenging period for Europe. The event is expected to boost bilateral relations and showcase Ireland's commitment to assisting Ukraine in its struggle against Russian aggression. Indonesia floods death toll surpasses 500 as rescue efforts continue at the Indonesian floods, triggered by a rare cyclone over the Malacca Strait, have resulted in a death toll exceeding 500, with ongoing rescue operations hampered by widespread devastation and logistical challenges. The floods have impacted over 1.4 million people across Aceh, North Sumatra, and West Sumatra, and the number of missing remains at approximately 500. Critical supplies and access to aid are severely limited due to impassable roads, washed-out bridges, and extensive mud and debris. Numerous residents are facing dire conditions, with many having not eaten for 2 to 3 days due to depleted food supplies. Communication is extremely difficult, with residents trekking kilometers for internet access and basic necessities like clean water. The situation is compounded by a lack of effective government response, with critics pointing to bureaucratic delays in distributing aid and inadequate preparedness. A focal point of the crisis is the Twin Bridges area in West Sumatra, where Mariana, a 36-year-old mother, has been desperately searching for her family, her mother, brother-in-law, and 15-year-old son, since November 27th. She has been consistently present at the site, hoping to expedite the rescue efforts and grappling with the agonizing uncertainty of their fate. Her repeated statements reflect the profound distress and fear she experiences, highlighting the immense human cost of the disaster. President Prabowo Subianto visited flood-affected areas in North Sumatra, acknowledging the continued road blockages, but emphasizing the nation's resilience and commitment to overcoming the challenges. Despite these assurances, the situation remains critically urgent, demanding sustained international assistance and a more efficient, coordinated response from local authorities. The ongoing search for missing individuals, coupled with the urgent need for food, water, and medical supplies, underscores the severity of the disaster and the vulnerability of affected communities. Thousands march against Crowborough asylum seeker plan, demonstrations against the planned temporary housing of 540 male asylum seekers at a military site in Crowborough, East Sussex, have continued despite the Home Office postponing the arrival of the asylum seekers. Approximately 4,000 people participated in the marches, comprised of families with children, who carried banners and chanted their opposition. The protests highlight community concerns regarding the Home Office's plan to utilize a former Army training camp for asylum accommodation. Organizers emphasized the community's opposition to the plan, citing anxieties about potential impacts on local services and safety. The demonstrations reflect broader tensions surrounding the UK government's approach to asylum seekers and refugee resettlement. The Home Office maintains its intention to proceed with the project, stating it will accelerate plans for operation once the site is fully prepared and deemed safe. However, the ongoing protests demonstrate significant local resistance. Concerns raised by demonstrators include potential strain on local resources, security considerations, and broader anxieties about immigration policies. The demonstrations have brought attention to the challenges associated with accommodating asylum seekers and the varying perspectives within communities regarding refugee resettlement. The protests represent a sustained effort by local residents to influence government policy and address their concerns. The Home Office's decision to postpone the arrival of asylum seekers does not necessarily signify a change in strategy, but rather a recognition of the level of local opposition. The situation in Crowborough exemplifies broader debates surrounding immigration, housing, and community engagement within the UK. The ongoing tensions underscore the complexities of integrating asylum seekers into local communities and the importance of constructive dialogue between government, local authorities, and residents. The delays do not negate the underlying issues of concern, and the protests are expected to continue until a satisfactory resolution can be found.